everyone. I hope everyone is doing wonderful today. It's a pleasure to be here, and my name is Nurhan Abdelaziz. I work for the UNFPA Egypt Country Office, working on innovation, gender, and youth empowerment. As most attendees today know, the YAR is an initiative that was founded in 2020 in response to COVID-19 and presents quite a comprehensive and empowering approach in trying to understand the impact of the pandemic on young people today. It's quite interesting to have young people from around the world given this platform to present the research findings and evidence to inform policies and programming and ensure responsiveness to their needs. So today there will be a series of knowledge sessions followed by research to action sessions tomorrow that are meant to enable the researchers to present their findings to policymakers and explore how the findings can be translated into tangible and practical policy recommendations. For today's knowledge session for the Arab states, we will be addressing the quite relevant topic of learning and youth-led action among Arab youth. 3 young researchers who we have today here who've been working with their teams over the past 18 months will be presenting their research findings to us. Today we have Rida Krisht and Aidel Abadidi who will be presenting the research on digital and civic action among young Arab adults in the time of COVID-19. And we also have Saad Okes, who will be presenting the research on university students in the era of COVID-19, using technology to overcome challenges in higher education in the Arab region. We also have our esteemed technical advisor, Dr. Riham Behi, who is an associate professor of international relations at the Faculty of Economics and Political Science at Cairo University, and she's also a visiting professor at the American University in Cairo. She has a wealth of experience and knowledge to share. Her background is far too extensive to share in this context, but her area of expertise really lies in the area of gender, and she's contributed to a number of research projects quite relevant to today's topic. Dr. Riham, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
So today, as I said, there will be 2 knowledge products presented, the research findings and main conclusions, and this will be a knowledge dialogue where we will listen and engage with the young researchers, and Dr. Riham will be here to actively contribute to the knowledge and provide useful insight to the research. Rida, I'll now hand you to the floor and present the first research topic, and then you can hand it over to Aidel once you're done. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nurhan, for this great introduction. I'll just wait for the screen. Good. Hi, we are the Arab States Team 1, and I am Rida Krisht. I'm the research lead for the team, and I'm joined here today by my colleague Aidel Abadidi, and we're about to present to you our mixed methodology study on examining the digital and civic activities among young Arab adults in the time of COVID-19, which helped reshape their communities, as well as magnify the structural deficiencies in the landscape that they are working in. On the right-hand side of the screen, what you see is a feature in our report, which is a heat map of the Digital Adoption Index, People Subindex, an index constructed by the World Bank to measure connectivity at the household level. Our Arab world this is our geographic scope, 22 states in the Arab countries, and subdivided into 4 subregions: the Gulf subregion, the Mashriq subregion, the Maghrib subregion, as well as the least developed countries. And this is taken from the UN ESQA. What you see in yellow are the survey respondents, the number of survey respondents, and what you see in orange is of those survey respondents, how many actually created or founded a new online community. Next, please. Good. So as you know, surveys among young Arab adults are really limited to non-Arab operated firms, as well as academic institutions that really are just motivated by publishing quotas. What we have here is a very passionate and voluntary local researchers from across 8 Arab states. We have Adel Lababidi from Syria, Amani Mahfouz from Egypt, Ammar Hadid from Iraq, Fakhri Yusuf from Pakistan, Wafa Sharif from Sudan, living in Qatar, Shaima Barakat from Yemen, as well as Sundus Hamad from Sudan, and myself. Every single one contributed to the data collection, to the data analysis, to the data interpretation, as well as the general write-up.
Thank you, Aida. Our research was a mixed methodology, both quantitative and qualitative. In the qualitative part, we identified our interviewee by snowballing, and our virtual in-depth interviews happened between December 23, 2020 to January 24, 2021, in which we interviewed 26 young adult leaders from 13 different Arab states. Then we identified 9 common themes and further classified them into 34 sub-themes. In our quantitative part, we collected our responses from January 4 to February 2, 2021, in which we collected 1,354 responses within age group of 20 to 35 years old from 22 Arab states. Data was disaggregated by explanatory variables like age, gender, nationality, among others. Our both survey and interview guide were piloted prior to start of data collection and were available in Arabic and English. Next slide, please. An interesting finding we had is the average daily hours spent online among our respondents. First, we classified them into 4 different categories. Those who spent less than 5 hours, 5 to 6 hours, 6.5 to 7.5 hours, and equal or greater than 8 hours. When we looked at the results based on sub-region, the Gulf in yellow was going against the trend of Mashriq, Maghreb, and least developed countries. As these countries are spending less than 5 hours, the opposite was happening with Gulf, as the majority of respondents spending equal or greater than 8 hours. Next slide, please. We looked at digital and civic activities among survey respondents and found that overall, our sample was more civically active than digitally active, with 61% civically active and 44% digitally active. We measured this according to many categories: supporting a friend or family member, materially delivering supplies, networking, or other, and offering in-person support for neighbor or stranger, like donating blood, buying groceries for the elderly, and volunteering. And what is worthy to note is the low volunteering across the sub-regions, with about 15%. On the digital activity side, we measured whether they offer digital support, like generated online creative or civic content, and generated online work or study materials. We noticed that the Gulf is the highest in offering digital support among all sub-regions. Back to you, Ghaida.
Beyond what Adel just shared with you, we actually noticed some gender differences across our older age group of 28 to 35, where we measured feeling overwhelmed with household tasks during the pandemic. Among our females, we noticed 55% were feeling overwhelmed or reported feeling overwhelmed, compared with only 39% of males that reported feeling overwhelmed. This actually translated to the ground. If you look on the left bottom side of the slide, you'll see that males in orange were more civically active across all the categories we measured compared with females, and actually registered at 25% of volunteering or donating to NGOs in comparison with the overall 15% that Adel just mentioned. Now, we'd like to give you a profile of the NGOs and initiatives that we interviewed for our qualitative side of the research. We interviewed across 13 states. There were 42% female founders as well as leaders of these NGOs and initiatives, and 58% male, most of which also belong to the older age group. Now, if we look at the actual classification, most 61.5% belong to the digital space, or a mix of digital and civic space, or those who were civic and had to transition to the digital space quite quickly due to the pandemic. And then the rest at 38.5%, which is significant considering there was a pandemic, they were actually working on the ground very effectively. And their areas of work ranged from mostly humanitarian services, followed closely by both public health and medical awareness campaigns and educational campaigns and services, as well as youth capacity building and empowerment, as well as others that actually included inclusive development involving youth with disabilities, and migrant communities, which actually involved a community-based participatory approach with the migrant community in Egypt, as well as social advocacy and mental health. Now, if we look at their periods of establishment on the left-hand side of the screen, we know what we want you to know is the mushrooming of activity in the period of 2015 to 2019, right after the Arab Spring, where most of them actually were established. But their establishment goes back about 2 decades. And this is the most this is the most period that they established. So actually go further into the types of challenges that these NGOs and initiatives actually encountered, which were several and common across all 26. And these were, of course, work disruptions, increased demand for services, economic challenges, poor knowledge of the coronavirus, which was associated with low compliance, as well as mental health issues, and then systemic conflict-related deterioration, a hesitation in trusting healthcare providers due to dilapidated healthcare systems, and a resistance to accepting and/or asking for support, and a pitying attitude towards people with disabilities. But regardless of all these challenges, they were met with innovative, solution-based responses on the part of our youth NGOs and initiatives, including increased collaborations across 3 sectors: the government, the private, the local and international NGOs, expanding their reach using technologies, innovative technologies at that, including VR, which is virtual reality tours, as well as assistive technology for the visually impaired. And even in Egypt, we saw a collaboration with the private sector to actually adopt electronic vouchers for food ration distributions to minimize the risk of COVID. In Sudan, what is worthy to note, and you'll see a couple of pictures from our initiatives and NGOs in Sudan on the right-hand screen, they exemplified all 3 types of collaborations. They had strong collaboration from the government side with the Ministry of Social Development, as well as the Ministry of Health, providing full fuel subsidies to actually get to faraway places and healthcare centers and COVID wards, among other things, as well as a collaboration with international NGOs, gaining aid, as well as diaspora. The Sudanese diaspora was very instrumental in support. Now, if we wanted to expand a little bit on the pandemic opportunities among Arab youth-led NGOs, we unfortunately do not have the luxury of time today to actually go into all the examples, but I'll just give a few. One of our initiatives that actually contributed to inclusive development for youth with disabilities experienced a 300% surge in their online volunteer base between January to July of 2021. We saw the birth of the first free teaching center in Beirut, currently experiencing among the worst economic crisis in the mid-19th century. We saw an initiative in Gaza take to neglected places and cover murals with beautiful art for messaging, for actually precautionary messaging, to encourage communities living in densely populated areas to take up precautionary measures. And we saw in Oman, the government actually provide a youth initiative with 3D printers to print masks for distribution to the public, as well as in Yemen, something extremely compassionate with a single doctor going down to the streets and initiating a mobile clinic in the neglected neighborhoods of Sana'a, where mostly he was dealing with people from backgrounds, from very low economic backgrounds, and offering free consultations. So what we'd like to also, just to go back, what we'd like to note in the respondents, going back to the first slide where we showed you our dynamic heat map, which showed the extent to which our respondents actually created or founded a new online community. We really want you to note the difference between Yemen, which has among the lowest DAIs in the region, 0.16, and compare that with among the highest DAIs, actually the second highest after the UAE in Saudi Arabia with 0.72. Yemen was more active in creating online communities than was Saudi Arabia. So in summation, we saw overall more civic activities than digital activities among our respondents, and there were marked sub-regional differences in spending average online hours per day, as well as offering digital support, where the Gulf actually surpassed all other sub-regions. Not surprising at all, considering the weak ICT infrastructure, electricity cuts, as well as low DAI in non-Gulf states. We also saw some gender differences, with males being more civically active than females, and that amplified the societal pressures in our region, where females are relegated to home-based care, whereas males are actually expected to provide outside the house. But in fact, 42% of the NGOs were founded by females, and 72% of those were actually digital. And this showcases that digital literacy is critical in actually encouraging female leadership. The NGOs that we interviewed were mostly digital in nature, with 61.5%. And in fact, 92% of them were from non-Gulf states, where ICT is generally weaker, and we suffer from occasional electricity cuts. So that leads us to the fact that ICT is a key factor affiliated with activism and regional collaboration. Where Yemen surpassed Saudi Arabia in being more active in founding and creating online communities, we notice that there's a necessity in Yemen. Yemen is currently war-torn and actually has an inaccessible airport with only one functional airport compared to a high-income country such as Saudi Arabia. It needs that to interact meaningfully with the international world. Undoubtedly, COVID-19 magnified structural challenges, especially in conflict and conflict-affected states. And actually, youth-led initiatives and NGOs were extremely responsive with relevant needs to their communities, and often covered state deficits and advanced their use of technology to actually maximize their reach. This leads us to some recommendations based on this evidence. Adil mentioned the extremely low volunteering across our survey sample. And we also noticed that very few, about 10%, actually received support, which we also measured. This leads us to urge Arab states to promote volunteering in school curriculums. And it urges us also for Arab states to think about reforming NGO registration processes and include e-government for more efficiency, and to actually have an enabling environment for youth NGOs and initiatives to work on the ground. And last but not least is something that we would like to further after this is all done, and that is building a strong Arab regional electronic platform for youth-driven NGOs to be able to exchange knowledge across the region and build connections. Adil, back to you.
And finally, we would like to acknowledge the people that without them, this research would never been possible. And we hope that we cover all of them, starting by the survey respondents and the initiatives that helped us in providing their information. And of course, the UNESCO YAR, the Arab Region Coordinator, including Hiba and Jenna. And thank you so much. Any questions?
Thank you, Adil and Rida, very much for this very insightful research that was conducted. I'll hand the floor over directly to Dr. Rahim to provide her insights. We won't have time for the Q&A due to the technical difficulties that took place at the beginning of the session. So for the attendees, please add your questions to the Zoom platform, and we'll make sure to respond to those at a later stage. Thank you. Dr. Riham, over to you.
Thank you, Nourhan, for the nice introduction, and thank you, Gida and Adil, for the presentation. Unfortunately, I did not read the entire research. I only read the short version of it that was sent to me. So I really, I'm very happy to see the numbers and to see your efforts and the scope of the 13 countries and that you worked on. فبجد I have to commend you for this very work, like to see it visually with the maps and with the initiative, something to be proud of, that Arab youth are doing all that. But I have some questions and some comments for you. I'm a qualitative person. So for me, I don't like numbers. And for me, sometimes numbers don't mean a lot when I see them. And I wanted to ask you, because I did not see the entire research, and maybe you added this in your survey or in your paper, but you did not have the time to present it. The question, why? Like, you provided like an overview of what happened during the Corona pandemic in terms of digital activism and civic activism. But did you ask in your survey the question why? Because I am interested in it. So for example, when you say there are gender variations, why is that? Okay, in the short version of the paper, you said maybe because of societal pressure. Is this the only reason? Or maybe the female participants did not like to go out. I don't know. But I would love to see the question why. I would like to see explanation. Why are those trends taking the shape that they took during the pandemic? So this is my first comment, and I was, of course, leave the time for you to respond. So gender variation and why? Because you said maybe it's societal pressure, and my question, is it only societal pressure? Did you ask them if there was societal pressure? In the short version, you mentioned digital activity, and I was not clear what is digital activity, but you clarified this very well in your presentation, those who founded online community or online services. You mentioned, this was the sentence in the shorter version. I don't know how you address it in your entire research. You mentioned that the Arab youth were less active, okay, 44%, for example. And my question was, less than who or less than what? Were they active before? Like, did you do like a short comparison before and after, like maybe before Corona or before the pandemic, they were more active, and then they became less active during the pandemic? Because more or less, for me, didn't mean anything in that context. I would like to know more than what or less than what, more than other areas, okay, or less than other areas, like more than Africa, more than Europe, more than Latin America. So more or less for me needs also something to compare with. This is my other point. And as I said, I would like to know reasons explored in the interviews, like why, for example, where those who are active, civically active, are more active in their immediate circle. Why? Okay, this is a very important question. Like, are there restrictions to reach a larger circle? So I would like to know why the immediate circle alone. Also in the shorter paper, and I didn't see that also clearly in your presentation when you said there are some structural challenges for the participation or for the activism or the engagement, such as, what are those structural challenges? And you said also that from the interview, you found that the level of activities do not match the intent. Why is that too? If they intend to being more active, why they did not take the chance or the opportunity to be more active? Okay, they don't want, they don't have the time, there are other obligations, there are maybe restrictions, legal restrictions, what? Okay, so why the activities do not match the intent? Also, I have you made a comment, or you made a statement in your paper that Arab youth were more active digitally than civically. For me, this is common sense because of Corona and because of lockdown. Was that the reason? Is it the lockdown? Is it the Corona? So people chose to be actively online than actively being active on the ground. So I would like also to know the rationale behind why they were more active digitally and civically, because for me, common sense is that, yeah, maybe because of the lockdown or maybe because the social distancing. Okay. I have I think one more comment before we go to the recommendation. Okay, also in terms of the challenges, I didn't see challenges that I expect to hear usually when we talk about activism, especially among young people. I didn't see the question of funding, okay? Where they get the money from, or maybe this is one of the reasons why they are not active. Funding, the laws, the culture, access to information. I didn't see those challenges presented in your presentation. Also, you said that there were some initiatives and you presented some of them. I would like to see ideas. You know, there are structural challenges, as you mentioned. Why those initiatives took shape? What were the creative ideas of those young people to get over those challenges? I would like to see that, okay? Creative ideas to overcome the challenges, because this can be lesson learned to other groups, to other people. So those who say, oh, we're not active because of the problem of funding or because of the laws. So see, these are some group who could actually overcome those challenges. So creative ideas to overcome challenges from the new initiatives could also strengthen your research. Because for me, I actually believe in the bottom-up approach. You mentioned the government a lot and the role of international organizations and the business. I believe in the bottom-up approach. So I like your recommendations very much, and I agree with them. In your paper, I didn't see in the presentation, you mentioned research, okay? When you say research, do you mean research on youth or research by youth? Because we need to understand this group of people, okay? We need to hear from them. We need to make their voices heard by the researcher. So maybe we need more research on youth, or maybe research by youth to be presented to the government, okay? Also, I believe in the bottom-up approach, meaning that people learn by doing. So I accept very much, and I agree that the school need to promote volunteerism and civic engagement. I totally agree with that. But also beyond the school, people learn by being engaged in projects. So I agree if we have more projects for engagement. I agree with you also about the committees, because the youth need to be heard, their voices need to be heard in the policy circles. And those are my comments. And thank you so much for this very insightful research.
Thank you, Dr. Rahim. I think the why is very important, and I'll give Rida and Aidel the floor to respond, but very briefly, please, I'd ask you to just stick to 2 to 3 minutes so that we can move to the next presentation, as we're quite limited on time today. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to start and then give it over to Adil if he has anything else to say. But we really appreciate the insightful comments from your end, Dr. Rahim, and very well taken, but you did not see our entire research. It is 90 pages. It is worthy to be a book. There are plenty of examples in there. We did not remove anything. We are just limited in time today, and we are unable to actually relay the type of creative actions that were taken, including, by the way, virtual reality tours from Palestine to the world in several different languages because of Congresswomen Ilhan Omar and Rashida Idlib being completely denied entry, right? They took the itinerary and set it up into a virtual reality tour. That's extremely creative. I mentioned the e-vouchers. That's extremely creative. There were others. The mobile clinic initiative is extremely creative. To answer your question on actual fund, the challenges. Yes, we explored sustainability issues. We explored 9 themes. We cannot present everything today, unfortunately. And we, as a team, definitely believe in a bottoms-up approach, and actually a creative initiative born out of Egypt, dealing with the migrant community at a time during the pandemic when the migrant community, for example, is paperless, identityless, doesn't have any state-sponsored papers, and everything is closed. They actually helped this cohort of people, but didn't come to help them in a top-down way. They came to help them in a way where they helped, as in migrants who had come to Egypt and settled, actually helped other migrants who were just coming into Egypt during the pandemic. So it was by migrants for migrants. And the other thing is regarding the question of why, which you mentioned several times. We have asked why. We would love to share our research with you. It is extremely extensive. The in-depth guide is there for you as well. The types of questions we asked, unfortunately, we cannot present on everything today. We're obviously very limited in time, and we don't want to take up the time of Arab States Team 2, which we're very excited to hear from. So I'll just go ahead and stop. And just to also answer your question about the time, the comparison for digital and civic is between digital and civic. It's not in terms of a time period. We just looked at this time period during the height of the lockdowns imposed across Arab states, which were early on this year, or early on, excuse me, in 2020. I'll stop and see if I did.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rida. I think there's a lot more room to discuss, and the research is very useful, and I'm sure we'll be able to translate it into practical recommendations for tomorrow. I'll now hand it over to Saad. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's really amazing to hear about the findings of the first team, and yeah, I have the pleasure to share with you our findings as YAR Arab team number 2. And while waiting, I guess, for our representatives, yeah, so the screen is shared, and yeah, I would love to share with you. So I'm Saad Wakas. I'm a recently graduated doctor from Morocco, and I would like to share with you some background story. In March 16, the lockdown was enforced in Morocco here, and I remember a story of a girl named Salma, a third-year engineering student that was studying here in the capital, Rabat. She was forced to get out of the student residency and get back to her parents who are living in rural areas in the south of the country. Salma, unfortunately, had to have her education disrupted and wasn't able to cope up with the limited online options that were offered at the time because of lack of resources, lack of internet access, and had to stay there with her parents to work, help them survive the pandemic. And Salma actually is not alone. According to a study done by UNICEF, up to February 2021, more than 196 million students still have their schools fully closed because of the pandemic. Education was really disrupted because of the pandemic. And in a study that we did last year in collaboration with UNESCO and WHO, we found out that for young people around the world, education disruption was one of the three major concerns that they were facing as young people, including mental health, education disruption, and job and economic stability. So today, as YAR Arab team number 2, we decided to work on university students in the era of COVID and the use of technology to overcome the challenges in higher education in the Arab region. And I have the pleasure to share with you the report of our work. So here are my team members, or our team member, starting from Michael from Egypt, Mahmoud also from Egypt, Islam from Palestine, Sama from Pakistan, UAE, Sundus also from Egypt, and Imtithal from from Yemen, and myself, Saad, from Morocco, and also acknowledging the support and the kind help from Hiba from UNESCO and Jana and all the UNESCO team for their support. And yeah, so starting with the first slide about the research topic. So as I said, the research topic aims to study what were the factors that were impacting successful implementation of online learning in the Arab universities during the pandemic, while highlighting how these transition affects learning as well as students' well-being. So we didn't limit ourselves to only the educational aspects, but we went into the personal, the mental health issues related to students and their learning during the pandemic. And here you can see again how that education disruption is one of the 3 top challenges, as I said. And also it's really important to look at it from different perspectives, from the social, personal, and academic perspective. And finally, to be able to gather and reflect on some recommendations to share them so that our stakeholders and decision makers can work on improving the quality of online learning today after 1.5 years after the pandemic. So our methodology was kind of similar to the first team. We had a mixed methodology where we collected data using a survey. So it was an anonymous survey that we disseminated across university students in the countries in the Arab region. So that was our inclusion criteria. So we got around 450 responses. And from those, we had the option, or people had the option to volunteer to engage in anonymous interviews. So we were able to do 10 interviews with people from different countries. And with that, we were able to construct our report and get some interesting findings. So sharing with you some of the findings, it's really interesting to start with how is students' technology capacity in the Arab region. What we found that 90% of the respondents felt that they have an advanced or intermediate proficiency using technology and digital tools, and 75% indicated that they felt an improvement of their tech and internet research skills during the past year, starting from the start of the pandemic until the period where we conducted the research. And that was from December 2020 to March 2021. And around 30% said that their university were able to provide them some technical support, some trainings to help them adapt, while you can see that 60% of universities weren't able to offer technical support for students. So that was an interesting reflection there. And finally, 57% of students' faculty was seen as somehow prepared to technology and digital use, and 24% were not prepared or poorly prepared, according to respondents of our survey. Moving on to the second category, which reflects on technology and online study quality or quantity for our respondents. So we found out that 70% spent 3 to 7 hours daily on online learning. So we can relate here to what was presented earlier by the first team about online use, seeing that we're targeting university students. So the majority of time would be on online studies, while 13% spent over 7 hours and 18% spent less than 3 hours. Other than that, we also noticed some challenges facing students when using those digital tools, such as the lack of interaction with both professors and also other peers, not being able to have the direct connection, technical platform and internet problems, especially in low middle income countries when speaking about our region, and also challenges in focus, concentration and time management. People staying in their houses, it wasn't the best environment and the most comfortable one to study. So other findings related to time management and also related to extracurricular activities. So we also tried to reflect on that. 33% said that universities offered some kind of online extracurricular activities, while more than half of students wanted to have future extracurricular activities to be hybrid. So a combination of online and face-to-face direct use of extracurricular activities. And also we have noticed that 43% of students or respondents were able to adapt quickly to online learning, and only 10% weren't able to catch up and to adapt. Moving on to more of the personal settings or personal personal findings. So what was interesting is that when asking students, what is your preferred way of studies or lectures in the future, we find that more than 60% prefer to have hybrid study method, and also 30% prefer to have in-person direct studying way, in comparison to only 6% who preferred only 100% online studies. So we can see that hybrid education was an interesting option for students in the way of, as it combines online and digital advancements and technologies, and adds it to the direct contact and study way that people were used to. So, and we'll reflect more on that in the analysis. And also, when asking students about the level of satisfaction with online learning, there is a certain balance there. You can see that some people were dissatisfied, and also another half, more or less, were satisfied to only 10%, for example, were highly satisfied. So there is a certain variation there. We didn't really note any difference between different countries or genders or specialities of studies. So it was really a mix there for this question. Moving on to the analysis, here you can see that COVID pandemic had more of a negative / neutral effect on students' perceived quality of education. So when asking students about their level of improvements or decrease of quality of education, people indicated that it stayed the same or it decreased. Also, the level of understanding of coursework, people said that it decreased. The people who said it decreased were more or higher than people who indicated an increase there. Same for the grades of students, as well as their level of attendance and participation in class. And some of the other challenges, as we said before, include the lack of interaction with professors, lack of time management, difficulty of time management, and also you can see that a considerable percentage of responses also felt that online learning increased their level of procrastination, and also it's worsened their sleeping pattern in a way. So that was interesting reflection. And speaking of benefits and the added values of online learning, you can see in this slide that some of the benefits were around saving time, you know, when transportation and also moving from a place to another. So online learning helped save time for many students, and also spending less resources on transportation, learning materials being accessible from anywhere and anytime. So that was a major advantage that was felt by students, and also learning being more flexible. So having the ability to, you know, study at your own pace was a good option that people preferred or enjoyed. And also, according to respondents, online learning and exam were less stressful than in-person classes and in-person exams. So that was also an interesting analysis there. And also participants were quickly able to adapt their lifestyle to the online learning system. So you can see that 62% were quickly able to adapt their lifestyle to the online system. So that was showing that there was, again, if we compare with the level of proficiency with technology use that was high for students, this shows us that students and youth have the ability and the readiness to accept and use these digital tools. So it is an interesting addition, as it turns out, from our findings. And finally, we find that more than half mentioned being able to better manage their time while learning online compared to in-person studies. So also having more time and flexibility was a good addition there. So finally, I would like to sum up or conclude my presentation by sharing some of the recommendations that we got from our participants and that we also as a team reflected on to our policymakers and stakeholders. So first, we feel that it's really important for decision makers to engage and implement policies to regulate online learning to ensure its quality and access for everyone. We can see countries in Europe today, such as Germany, which have laws, policies, regulation in the university level and the national level, which explains, regulates, and determines the use of digital technologies in the educational system and also in the health system and other fields. So we feel that universities today in Arab states should have such regulations and policies so that it's acknowledged and so that it's regulated and so that it's offered and given a priority. Our second recommendation is to have a balanced hybrid program. So we feel that using a hybrid program is indeed a very successful and preferred option by both students and also by academic institutions. So preparing students and also preparing especially academic faculty is a must. Supporting them and engaging, training them to use this hybrid program is an important recommendation there. Third recommendation is regular evaluation systems for professors by students. We felt that we need to strengthen this connection between students and professors and really give the floor to students for evaluation and to express their feedback to professors so that they can together improve the quality of the learning experience. And fourth recommendation is to ensure support for students' mental health. As we presented, mental health, level of procrastination, lack of sleep, all those symptoms were expressed by students, especially during the pandemic. So it's a must for every university to offer such support systems for their students to help them cope up with these challenges and keep their mental health level sane and safe so that they can study in a good way. And before last one, to offer affordable and easy access to good quality internet and devices. So access to devices, access to good quality internet is not something universal, at least in our region, unfortunately. So universities, countries, decision makers need to invest in that as a priority so that because as we said, it's a necessity now to move to hybrid education and to have a successful educational system, we need to offer such resources in an equitable way. And finally, we need to offer trainings and capacity building programs for professors to be more prepared to use those digital tools to really be able to offer an engaging, interactive, and beneficial learning experience for their students while using these digital tools. So those were our recommendations. And yeah, that was our presentation. And we are welcoming any question or feedback.
Thank you, Saad. I think this is very timely research and quite useful for our time in this digital transition that we're experiencing, the new normal. Dr. Rehem, I'll give you the floor to provide your reflections and especially on your current experience being a professor yourself during the pandemic. I'm sure that you have a lot of insight and reflections on this kind of research. Please, the floor is yours. Apologies, I'll also just mention that we only have 15 minutes left for the session, as we're still committed to ending at 12, unfortunately.
Yes, okay, I'll keep my comments short. Thank you, Saad, and your team for this presentation. The topic is very dear to my heart because I experienced it myself as a professor at Cairo University and also at the American University in Cairo, and I spoke about it in a number of occasions from experience. Thank you for the presentation. I didn't, of course, read the whole research. I read the very brief paragraph that you sent, and I have a lot of questions on your presentation. So excuse me if I'm going to be a little, I don't know how to say it, but I'm going to be a little something. So Saad, let's start with your research question. The research question is some kind of problematic you don't know the answer to. But from your research question, you already accepted the fact that online teaching or learning was successful from the framing of your question. So I'm asking you or requesting that you reconsider that. Make it a question mark. Was it successful or not? Okay, and then see from the interviews and from your groundwork, what is it going to be? Was it really successful or not? So, from the framing of the question, أنت حكمت إنها successful. So, please reconsider that. My other question for you, I didn't get the sample size. I saw that you did 10 interviews, right? What is the rest of the sample size?
Yes, so the way we went is that we had the survey, and from the survey, people had the choice to indicate if they were.
How big is the survey? The size of the survey?
As we mentioned, we had 448 responses.
I have a, yani, I'm not qualitative person. Sorry, I'm not a quantitative person, but I have a question about the sample size. Can we actually judge or make a claim that 10% said that or 50% said that only from 10 interviews or 400 respondents from the entire of the Arab world? I don't know. I have a question mark about the sample size. I have another question, and I would like to keep my comments brief. I found, what is the word? Tanaqud. Inconsistency in the answers.
Okay.
Or what is it? What is the word that you wanted to use?
Contradiction.
Contradiction, exactly. So you mentioned, for example, and also again, before al-tanaqud, again to the why question. Okay, you said 27% were satisfied with the online learning. I need to know why. Why were they satisfied? My son was satisfied with online learning because he will mute the teacher and go back to sleep. Okay, so why is that satisfaction? I would like to know that. No attendance, maybe. Okay, that could be a reason. So satisfaction doesn't indicate that online learning was a success. Okay, I want you to take that into consideration. And then let's go back to the contradiction. People said 27%, you said they were satisfied. And then I think there was 10% very satisfied. But then when you talked about the quality, people were not happy about the quality. So how come they were satisfied, but then they were not happy with the quality? Where does the satisfaction come from? Okay, so the interview question will get that. Okay, we'll get these kind of contradiction. You said they perceive decreased quality. Okay, so why were they satisfied? Also, yani, excuse me to say this, a research like this would require reading, okay, about learning and teaching and the function of university. I didn't see that in your research from the things that you focused on. Okay, for example, a very important question, okay, for the online teaching and learning thing is academic freedom. You didn't touch on the issue of academic freedom. Students were less active in classes because classes were recorded. Okay, so these are very important issues. Okay, academic freedom and participation, because everything is recorded. Anybody can use what is being recorded, even professors. Okay, they will think twice before making any comments. So academic freedom, these also an issue to be taken into consideration. Also the issue of, you said students want hybrid or they want online. How is this related to the function of the university? The university doesn't only deliver subjects, okay? It's life, it's campus life. Okay, activities, we're teaching them to be citizens, to interact between classes, between genders, and instead of being secluded in the room in front of a screen. The university is bigger than this, okay? Bigger than just learning and teaching. So maybe also you need to address this issue, the role of the university. The issue of mental health is very important. Okay, and if everything or all the services are being delivered online, so why universities stopped delivering mental support and mental health support online as well? Universities have offices to support students who struggle. Why they do not continue to offer those services online? So when you said that we need to continue on the issue or to pay attention to the issue in your recommendation to the mental health, please say how, okay? Mention your recommendation. How can we support the mental health issue if we continue with the online version of learning and teaching? And my final comment, I didn't see in your presentation a mention of conflict area. I know I saw a hint about it in the smaller summary, but you need to problematize this, okay? You know, conflict areas like Yemen and like Syria, schools were destroyed. I know from, as a fact, in Yemen in particular, schools were destroyed. Maybe the online learning, okay, it's good for the student to stay at home and get their education, and instead of going out and face the challenges of an ongoing war and conflict. This is one thing. Also for girls, okay, in remote areas, the online teaching provided them with access that they did not have before. So these also issues that need to be taken into consideration. I'm sorry that I'm very passionate about this issue. So thank you so much for this research, and unfortunately my time is up. I will give back the floor to Nurhan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Naham, for your useful insight. I think it's very useful to reflect on this issue, as it's so relevant to us all today, even those outside of the academic sphere. Saad, please, I'll give you 5 minutes to respond to the points, as we're very limited on time. Please stick to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Nurhan, and thank you really, Doctor and Professor, for sharing those reflections and, you know, constructive feedback. And yeah, it's really important, as you said, to maybe try to focus on such issues, speaking about students in conflict areas. Maybe we didn't shed light on that specifically in our presentation, but yeah, we tried to take some interviews. We had 2 interviewees from Yemen and Syria, I remember. So those were shared, I guess, in the big report. And yeah, I guess such insights should be important. And what you said about mental health, yeah, is completely correct. So speaking about the recommendation, I guess that's something that needs to be considered, and maybe sharing more specific recommendations would be the way to go. So in this case of a hybrid, this would be maybe the specific actions to be taken by different universities, and in case of in-person education, this would be the actions to be taken. And yeah, we can think of student support or mentorship programs. We can think of cells, as you said, which are there in the office of university. We can think of life education programs. And also you spoke about that, life education and the role of universities in life education. We tried to briefly mention that, talking about extracurricular activities, about level of satisfaction on online learning, and also what people missed from not being in university. So we were able to capture some insights about the role of university when, you know, socializing and engaging people in social life, as well as building life skills, as you said. Maybe it wasn't mentioned in the presentation, unfortunately, but yeah, I completely agree with you that it is a very important aspect. And we say it in Arabic, right? Wizarat al-Tarbiyya wa Ta'lim. So Tarbiyya, which is, I don't know the word in English, but raising those students and equipping them with education and values and skills to make them better citizens is a must. And that's a role that every educational institution should play. So I guess, yeah, showing that and even maybe reflecting on some recommendations around that could be an interesting way forward for us. And yeah, what you said about, let's more or less, the level of satisfaction or the contradiction, we felt that there was some, you know, unbalance in the answers, where people did indicate, when asking them about what were challenges that you had, people indicated that they had challenges with time management. So that came like 30 or 40% indicated that. And then when asking them about how was your time management level during online studies compared to in person, people indicated that their time management level was better. So ourselves, we felt that that kind of difference in answers. We tried to analyze that and also see from interviews, and we felt that it was such issues were relative from person to person. Each one had different experience, sharing from their personal background and from their personal situation. So it was not something that we could really agree or conclude on. And speaking about the level of, you know, because that's the thing, when talking about 27% were satisfied about education, that was a perceived level. But when asking them questions like what was the level of grades, or what was the level of engagement of, or the level of concentration, so this one was more or less measurable. When asking someone about grades, they can simply tell you if they had better grades or less grades. But then when you ask them about the level of satisfaction, it includes multiple factors, as you said, and also asking about the why. So yeah, the multitudes of factors can really make us think about, okay, what are the priorities, what are the interests of students when going to education, what are maybe the main things that each university should include. So yeah, I guess that's a reflection for all of us, to try to think more about it, to try to work more about it, and yeah, dive more into this topic, which is, you know, SDG 4 is one of the most urgent and important topic for all of us as young people. So thank you for your feedback, and I hope that tomorrow we can even discuss and reflect more about it, and together be able to reach more ideas and reflections. And I give the floor back to Nurhan.
Thank you so much, Saad, for that comprehensive response. I'd like to thank all of the speakers today, Dr. Riham, Rida, Saad, and Adil. It was a pleasure. I think it was a very insightful discussion and a great start, and a very, very solid foundation for tomorrow's discussion in the research to action session. I look forward to tomorrow, and I thank you again. And apologies for the attendees that we were not able to take questions. Please, if you have any questions, add them to this to the platform, and we will make sure to respond to those. Thank you again, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye.